I think it's a little early yet for us to see or expect any major changes as regards the inclusion of private capital into Chinese commerce. It will happen, but I think that this year is going to be a year of the Chinese government actually sorting out some of the wheat from the chaff. There's been some bad developments in China. There's been some poor local banks, funds, some linked to corruption, others just badly managed, but have found their way into the system. And I think that this year, we've already seen one or two instances, but I think we're going to see a few more of bankruptcies, of funds and trusts not being able to meet their obligations. So I think that we need to see all that move out of the financial industry, binned, got rid of and cleaned up before we start to see private equity and private capital coming into the market. So I think it's early days. China will do it. It does need that entrepreneurial mindset and that entrepreneurially generated income into its system. But as I said, I think it's early days. There is a bit of rubbish to get out of the system first. So let's deal with that. That will create some headlines. But after that, after this is passed, I think we'll start to see an increasing interest and involvement of private capital coming into the Chinese markets. We don't really want the shadow banking system in place, but in order to replace it, you need to provide licenses to very secure, well-respected corporate brands and the likes of Alibaba, who will use that financing to allow their own customers to purchase products. I think this is a good route. So rather than having to go through shadow banking, you'll be able to go through brands as opposed to estate lenders. So I think it makes a lot of good sense for the likes of Alibaba to have these licenses, and I'm sure that with the competent management team they have in place and a generally effective regulatory system in place in China, then the likes of Alibaba and their ilk in private financing will be a success story. I'm not sure that virtual currencies are really going to be the way forward. They're unregulated, which causes problems. It's a nice high-tech thing to be able to have, but in order to make that a global phenomenon, it needs to be regulated, and governments around the world need to be in synchronization about how that's going to be done. So it's nice, it's fun, it's kind of funky, it's slightly anarchistic. I've got a Bitcoin, you've just got regular money. So it's kind of a cool thing to have, but I don't think it's sustainable, and it won't be unless we can get governments around the world to agree on how to regulate that industry. So early days. It may or it may not be the precursor to something new coming up in terms of how we manage global financing. But as it stands right now, Bitcoin, I think, is not up to the mark. I don't think it's going to be up to the mark. And whether or not it just dies as an interesting idea, or whether there is something more in that technology behind it which could be used later on to create a more sustainable currency with regulatory help, is a different issue. So Bitcoin, no, I don't think so. The technology behind it and governments getting behind in the regulatory environment to bring forward, let's say, Bitcoin 2.0, that's perhaps a more interesting question, where the technology is going to lead us.